further explore these issues, today I'm speaking with Fatima Adamu, who has spent over 2 decades providing consultancy services and conducting research in areas of gender and women's rights around education, health, and transport. Her experience over recent years had centered around managing projects that focus on community engagement, voice, and accountability, and empowering young women to transit into professional training. She's the executive director of Nana Girls and Women Empowerment Initiative in Sokoto, Nigeria, as well as an independent consultant. She recently worked in partnership with key stakeholders on the high-volume transport project Empower. The Empower project, where we'll hear more about it in a minute, gathered new data on the extent of sexual harassment with evidence from 2 sub-Saharan cities, Lagos in Nigeria and Blantyre in Malawi, to fill knowledge gaps and to assist in the delivery of safe and inclusive transport. The project culminated in the launch of the She Can tool that specifically addresses causes of sexual harassment and aims to build the capacity of transport professionals to improve the personal security of their female passenger. Welcome, Fatima. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you.
So great also to have you. So let's dive immediately into the issues. So as I introduce you, you are an expert also on gender issues. So let's start with particulars on the issue of women and transport. We know also that transport being the key to growing economies, to quality of life, to accessing basic services, to connecting people to jobs, yet transport is not inclusive. What would you say are the main inequalities that you have seen around women in transport? What experience are women telling you about?
Thank you very much. For women, transport is life itself, because transport is about mobility. You can't move from here to here without a means of transport, especially if I distance travel. So it's such a big issue, but yet women are facing a lot of challenges in the area. So we can look at it in different ways. We can look at it women as transport users, for example. Our experience have shown that they fall victims of crimes as they try to access transport services. They are physically attacked. They are sexually harassed. And they are discriminated against. Some of them, for example, women, when we walk, we come with our babies at the back, we carry our luggage, and then we also want to get to the bus. And the bus are not willing to wait for them. So sometimes buses will see them standing, waiting to be in the bus, and they will not stop because they have seen them with luggage, with children. And so the complaint is they feel the transport services do discriminate against women. So it's such a big issue for us. And so that's women as transport users. So we look at women as employers in the transport sector. As we know, transport is a male-dominated sector. So we are really working with women to go into that sector and to make it women-friendly. And so it has not been easy for some of these women. They tend to occupy low position within the sector. And again, those that are drivers, and we've had a lot of complaints from women drivers, they are denied passengers. They are being attacked. They are going into a male space, a space that they shouldn't be there. A woman was telling me, one man said, you should be in your husband's house, not in this space. So that's the kind of exclusion the transport sector really bring out for women trying to be involved in the transport. So we even bring them together in a meeting to see how they can be conscious of the women experience.
Thanks, Fatima. That's very interesting, and it's really highlighting different perspectives from women as users of public transport or informal transport, as well as a role and as employees. So what you're saying is, in fact, currently there is a gender blindness when it comes to women and transport. Is that correct?
Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. It's interesting the way in which transport is seen as a neutral thing. It's not like the hospital. So transport is seen as a neutral, And this is really even with the policy makers, with the transport operators and professionals. It's seen as neutral. And so therefore, because it is neutral, the needs of women are not factored in. And up to now, our transport system is yet to recognize this triple role of women. Women are not just economic actors. They are also mothers. They are also farmers. They have multiple roles which they carry along with them. But the transport system in Nigeria and across Africa is yet to recognize these needs of women. And this is because of the gender blindness that is inherent in our transport system. And the same thing with the transport operators. I remember we wanted to go into dialogue with the unions, with some of the transport unions. There was this issue. Women complained that during the peak period, when there was some rush hours, the men always push the women aside. And that was also the time many of the women were rushing back to go to the house in order to cook. And yet the men brush them aside, take over the seat. And we tried to engage with the union to see how kind of arrangement would be made so that women would have a separate line or a separate bus and the men will have a separate bus. That did not work out. So what I'm saying is there is that gender blindness, and what it does was to perpetuate the inequality and discrimination that women encounter in the transport sector. And there is this fear. And so women don't feel safe. In fact, our research showed that women don't feel safe using the public transport system. And this is a big issue for us as transport rights advocates in the continent. How can we get our transport system to integrate the need of women, the triple role of women in the society?
So you said transport is seen as neutral, but that's just as from a male perspective. The need is recognizing by transport operators, by the unions, by policymakers. As you said, you work in this NGO. So what are you telling them? What needs to change?
So what needs to change? Three things. Number one is to ensure that the way even the buses are even constructed, that it gives room for some space for luggage. And in most cases, it is assumed that everybody is coming from office. That's the assumption, the mentality. So everybody is coming from office with a holder and can sit or stand. Women do come from market and they come with their luggage. That is not a factor in the even design of our buses. So that's one. The second area is even the way in which during the rush hour, you can't expect men and women to be pushing each other. And so in most cases, women stand by and allow the men to enter. So even though they close market at the same time, but women always stay behind until the night to get to home, and which doubly also exposes her to sexual harassment. So the third one is bringing the space. I feel there's no space. In Nigeria, for example, if it is in the school, we have school management committee wherein the user and the providers do come together. There is a platform. They listen to each other's complaint. The same thing in the health sector. The same thing in the water. But in the transport sector, because of the thinking of this neutrality, there's no any space wherein the user and the provider interact and talk to each other. You do see complaint boxes put in some of the motor park, whatever. They are just used. The majority of the ordinary women cannot read and write. So the fact that you're expecting a woman even rushing to put in a complaint and put there, it will not be effective. So what I'm saying is that these are the three. Where can the women and the operators and the policymakers, majority are men, let's come with a system where there is some feedback, some interaction. We have them, for example, as I've said, in the education sector, we have them in the health sector, but we don't have them in the transport sector.
Have you seen any good examples? Is there sort of like some hope for the women in Nigeria, and which you can actually share with us, saying things can actually change when you work together?
Yes, I think there is. So in our engagement with the Prime Minister of Transport, for example, they've invited us to work together with them to see how they can mainstream gender in the transport sector. So at least they've started listening to us in that direction. But we feel that changing that social norm, it takes time. But what is interesting is at least that dialogue has started. And I have to give credit to the Empower Project and the Durham University that we're working with. So there is improvement in the engagement. If you look at a decade ago, there is improvement, but we haven't reached there. I don't think we're even halfway.
So it's good to hear that there's some progress, but as you said, still also quite a way. Let's talk a little bit more about a really serious issue which you already raised, which is sexual harassment, particularly on public transport. Often women facing sexual harassment when using public transport, and has been a key focus of some of your work. So we know it's globally that's an issue. It's not also just in Nigeria. Unfortunately, this has happened far, far too much all around the world, that particular women and girls facing that and feel unsafe on public transport. And then on top of that, as you mentioned, the situation in Nigeria and other places also where you have a lot of use of minibuses, of informal sector. What is the extent of this issue? So I heard, and when we talked there, you did some research about scale and what impact is having that.
Yeah. So I'm one of the partners for this LGBT project, the Empower project. And one of the important components about it is the research. So there are actually three components: the research, the stakeholder engagement, and then the development of a SHE-CAN tool, the sexual harassment tool. So let me look at the research. So it's really for Lagos, for example, about 70% of our respondents, and that's over 3,000 passengers we interviewed. 70% of them said they have witnessed sexual harassment on public transport.
Can I dive in here? So you said 70%.
70%. We interviewed over 3,000 passengers. And 70% said they have witnessed it, but 45% experience it. You can see how the magnitude of the problem. And some of this include verbal abuse, inappropriate touch, some intimidation, pushing and banging. And these are all the daily experience of women and the public. But particularly women, because it's more women feel more unsafe from the research. That is the daily experience women face. Just for them to move from one place to another, this is the daily experience they have. And they said, where most of this happen? The sexual harassment. According to that research, it's happened while they are waiting. 36% said mostly it's happened when they are waiting for the buses. And we all experience it. I do. About 34% said they experience it while walking from the bus. You know, our buses, you need to walk to get to the home. So some young boys, they know that's where the bus stop, and they know it, especially students and young girls. And they know that is the route they take. And they will come around that time just to harass them. Only 20% said it happened 20% said it happened in the bus. And that's really the whole issue. And our experience has shown there is even limited understanding of what is the harassment. So some people, because of overcrowding, it makes it more easily to be women find it easily to be harassed when it is overcrowded. And that is the reality. And that's some of the findings we made. We also found out about underreporting, for example. There is a lot of reporting. But what is interesting is that for me, the positive part of it is that women are willing and are ready. They open up. They discuss their experiences. And so, in fact, they are more willing to discuss their experiences than men. We found out that some men, they don't want to discuss it. But for me, together with LAMATA, that's the Lagos Metropolitan Transport Authority, it was such a revealing findings for many of us. We never thought it's this high until we had the result. And that's why LAMATA is working seriously on that issue, thanks to the project.
So Fatima, so you shared this incredible and terrible high numbers, and thanks also for sharing that and those examples. It's very good to hear that you said so LAMATA is one of the largest, in fact, African agencies so on public transport. Say, well, this is very revealing. Did they say what are the consequences out of that? So what can a public transport operator do, or what should they do?
Yeah, so it's good that we have LAMATA, we have Abuja, all this in Nigeria. These are the two biggest transport operators and authority. And we've also gotten the ear of the Federal Ministry of Transport. We are also engaging with the union. We are getting Ministry for Women Affairs, for example. We need to bridge the gap that exists between the different responsibilities that exist to handle the issue of sexual harassment in the transport sector. The way it is divided, some handling sexual harassment in this side, the other one, the handling transport in this side, with the big gap, not talking to each other, that needs to end. And it's only when that is achieved that I can see you will hear less complaint from people like me. But otherwise, we will continue to make such a demand.
We already talked about policy. We talked about some of the research, but let's go back also, or let's go to the workers you have done for the high volume transport research. It's a project called Empower. So tell us a little bit more about Empower and the researchers you did there.
What is interesting for us, during the stakeholder engagement, mapping and the engagement, we found that over 90% of those who had experienced harassment in the transport sector, they do not report. It's one of the research findings, 90%. So we brought these findings to the stakeholders, and these stakeholders covers both the government, the transport operators, transport unions, CSOs are together. And we shared these findings and tried to understand their own take on all of this. And that was when we came to realize that even among the key stakeholders in the transport sector, they have different understanding of sexual harassment. So what I consider, as I've given the example, the issue of the touching, many there said, what's wrong if in the bus the man touched you? Some of the language used in that sector was also, women found them insulting, but for the men, they don't find it insulting. So this is some of the issues that we found that was really interesting for us, that we found very useful beyond the Empower project, because now the Empower has ended. It's really that sensitization, that understanding of women's perspective when it comes to transport. Another issue that we found as a result of the Empower was the limited knowledge on the right of transport users. So in that stakeholder engagement and mapping, in fact, including the passengers, for example, they are unaware of their right as transport users. And it's one of the things we want to integrate into the federal transport policy. What is the right of the user? So, for example, in one of the projects, we're even thinking of, can we work with the transport union to have customer charter, where in very clear what are the rights of the transport user? I've given you my money to use your bus. What am I entitled? It's not just for you to take me from here to here. I want to go there safely. So one thing we also found was that there is that limited knowledge around that. Also data. It was also in that Empower workshop, we realized that the Federal Ministry of Women Affairs do collect, for example, every state in the Federation, across the nation, every state submits monthly data on gender-based violence related issues. So either in school or in the marketplaces, in all other public spaces, for example, but not on the transport. So that is another issue. There are data in the transport, sexual harassment in the transport sector are not recorded, are not available. And so, of course, since it's not recorded, it will not be factored into the policy of government. So that's one serious gap that we found through the Empower. And I mentioned the issue of limited coordination and among stakeholders. And roles were not clearly defined. So, for example, who is to collect data on the sexual harassment in the transport sector? Is it the Women Affairs or is it the Trans Ministry? It's not also clear. One important lessons we learned for us from Empower is the definition. Groping, for example, to what extent it is. And that is an issue. So Empower had to come up with its own definition because our client, our respondents, we have to, when we're doing the research, we have to explain to our respondent what do we mean by sexual harassment so that they can work within that context and they can understand that what we're talking about, and especially for the men. So I think for me, for the Empower project, it brought the issue of transport and gender-based violence together, which wasn't the case. And also it helped us to bring both the government and the CSO together on the issue of transport.
Please tell us a little bit about Empower as a had created this She Can tool. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so the She Can tool is a tool meant to address gaps in the area of transport sector to address the issue of sexual harassment. And it's really trying to provide information to all the important stakeholders. So it has different sections. If you're a policymaker, there is a section for you and all the information you need in order, one, to ensure that you have a policy, a system that will address the issue of sexual harassment. This She tool, it went through a lot of processes. We had a lot of engagement with different stakeholders, and before we finally come to it. And so it has that component for the policymakers, the knowledge they need. And if you are an operator, transport operator, there is a section for you. What I like for me as an NGO, as an advocate, there is a section for me where if I need knowledge about what needs to be done, what are the issues around young women access to transport, I will get it also there. So it also gives room for transport users to report. So what we're saying, the policy makers, the transport operators can use She Can tool to gather data about how their passengers feel about their transport system. So it's a very comprehensive tool, but because it is comprehensive, it requires a lot of engagement. I've seen it, I've used it, and Lamata has used it. Abuja is using it. We need to get people to see it, to engage them, to apply it.
Okay.
It is freely available. Download it, and you definitely find it useful.
That's fantastic. And for our listeners, it's actually in the description. You'll find also the link and you'll find also the information, and you will find Fatima and her NGO, the contacts either there or also on LinkedIn. So that's fantastic. Thank you so much about also sharing more about the tool, but also sharing more about the Empower project. And we heard almost like the importance of data collections, the increasing of rights of users, but also the importance of better coordination also between the stakeholders. And these are crucial factors moving towards also more recognition of the challenges for girls and women in the transport sector. Let me also come up with one final question to the end of our podcast. If we look now, it's like 10 years further in the future, what had happened in 10 years in Nigeria or in the continent, and what were the steps in between to make sure that we have a more safer and inclusive transport system in your country?
I am positive. In the next 10 years, the rate at which we're going, I'm positive. I see us more women going into the transport sector. I mean, really engaging in it and employed into the transport sector. And we're really encouraging more and more young ones to go into that sector. Number two is the policy environment, I'm sure, will, because increasingly there is the recognition. I said there is increasing zero tolerance to, for example, issue of sexual harassment, issue of gender and disability, issue of inclusion generally. And there is, I think, favorable reception to the need to be more inclusive in whatever we're doing. So, and that is what I'm seeing. Where I have concern about is, I mentioned it, is in that transition. I feel it might take us 20 years to get our transport formalized, but I think even if we did not get it formalized, the informal sector, there has to be some regulation that will go into it, into the informal sector. I feel that would also, there will be also some improvement in that direction. But my concern out of all of this is that, remember, having women employed in the transport sector, that does not automatically translate into it being women-friendly. So is the extent to which we do not lose that sight, that because we have more women joining the transport sector, we automatically assume that the system would be friendly. We need to pursue the two together. Changing the system to be gender sensitive and at the same time getting more and more women employed in the transport sector. So I have positive view as long as we continue to push and as long as the public continue to listen and respond to our needs and our demand.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Fatima, really highlighting it's not just about bringing more women as employers and employees in the sector, but also making the sector more gender sensitive. And I think that for me is a great closure. Thank you so much again. I hope many people will listen to the podcast and listen to you, your NGO, and all the people who are working on this so important topic. So thank you very much again. And thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to share my experience and also to give the voice of some of the many of the women we interact with on a daily basis. Thank you.
So thank you for listening to this episode. If you'd like to find out more about the work of our guests and any of the resources, please check out the links in the description. I also encourage you to listen to the other episodes in the series. Also, you can leave us a rating, hopefully a good one, and a review. It really helps others find our podcast. If you'd like to learn more about the work of the high volume transport, you can check out our website at transport-links.com or follow us on Twitter at transport_links or on LinkedIn at High Volume Transport Applied Research Program. The High Volume Transport Applied Research Programme, HVT, is an £18 million investment by the UK Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, FCDO. The programme's new body of research aims to help inform decisions of policymakers in low-income countries and make road and rail transport greener, safe, and more accessible and affordable. My name is Holger Dahlmann, and you have been listening to Reimagining Motion. Thank you. Stay and travel safe wherever you are. Goodbye and auf Wiedersehen.